I've always had trouble sleeping. Even as a kid, I'd lie awake for hours staring at the ceiling, mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quiet. But the sleep paralysis didn't start until my second year of grad school. The first time it happened, I thought I was having a stroke or something. I woke up, fully conscious, but couldn't move a muscle. My eyes darted around the room in panic while my body remained frozen, like I was trapped inside myself. Then came the pressure on my chest, like someone was sitting on me, and the absolute certainty that something else was in the room with me. I never actually saw anything that first time, just felt a presence, malevolent and watching. When I finally broke free from the paralysis, gasping and sweating, my tiny studio apartment was empty, of course. Just me and my mounting student debt, and the stack of ungraded freshman composition papers I'd fallen asleep on. The episodes started happening more frequently after that. Once a month, then once a week, then almost every night. Always the same. The paralysis, the weight on my chest, the presence. Sometimes I'd see shadows moving at the edges of my vision, but never a clear figure. The lack of sleep was destroying me. I started nodding off during lectures, missing deadlines, forgetting basic words mid-conversation. My advisor noticed, suggested I see someone about it. "You look like hell, Marcus," she said, not unkindly. "Whatever's going on, get help before it tanks your dissertation." So I went to the University Health Center, where an overworked doctor listened to my symptoms for about 3 minutes before diagnosing me with stress-induced sleep paralysis. He prescribed a mild sedative and recommended reducing caffeine and screen time before bed. Standard advice that did absolutely nothing to help. That's when I saw the flyer on the bulletin board outside the psych department. Sleep paralysis study. Participants needed for clinical trial of new treatment approach. Compensation, $6,000 for completed 8-week study. $6,000. That would cover my rent for months, maybe give me enough breathing room to actually focus on finishing my dissertation. And if they could help with the sleep paralysis too, it seemed too good to be true. I called the number that same day and spoke to a research assistant who asked me a series of screening questions. How often did I experience episodes? Did I see or hear things during them? Had I ever been diagnosed with any other sleep disorders or mental health conditions? Apparently, my answers qualified me for an in-person assessment the following week. The research facility wasn't on the main university campus, but in a modern glass building on the outskirts of town, the Somnus Institute for Sleep Research, according to the sign in the minimalist lobby. Everything about the place screamed cutting edge and well-funded, a far cry from the cramped, outdated labs in the university's psychology department. Dr. Eleanor Voss, the lead researcher, was not what I expected. I'd pictured some elderly academic type, but she was maybe 40, with sharp features and the intense focus of someone who dedicated her life to a single pursuit. Her handshake was firm, her smile practiced but not quite reaching her eyes. "Your case is quite interesting, Marcus," she said after reviewing my preliminary questionnaire. "The frequency of your episodes has increased dramatically in a short period. That's unusual, but potentially very useful for our study." She explained that the Somnus Institute was testing a new approach to treating sleep paralysis, a combination of medication and what she called targeted neural stimulation. The goal was to interrupt the brain patterns that cause paralysis while maintaining normal REM sleep. "We're not just masking symptoms like traditional sleep medications," she said. "We're addressing the root neurological mechanisms. If successful, this could be the first actual treatment for sleep paralysis, rather than just management techniques." It sounded promising. Too promising, maybe, but I was desperate enough not to question it too deeply. I signed the consent forms, provided blood and saliva samples, and was fitted with a special EEG cap that I would wear during overnight sessions at the facility. The study protocol required me to spend 3 nights a week at the institute, where they would monitor my sleep and administer the experimental treatment. The other 4 nights, I'd sleep at home wearing a simplified version of the monitoring equipment and take the study medication. There were 7 other participants besides me, all with chronic sleep paralysis. We rarely saw each other, as our overnight sessions were scheduled on different days, but we occasionally crossed paths during morning checkouts or evening check-ins. Danny was the one I talked to most, a barista with dyed blue hair and more piercings than I could count. She'd been dealing with sleep paralysis since her teens and had a darkly humorous approach to the whole thing. "My sleep demon's been with me so long I should start charging it rent," she joked during our first conversation in the Institute's waiting room. But beneath the humor, I could see the same desperate exhaustion I felt. The first 2 weeks of the study were uneventful. I took the medication, small blue pills that Dr. Voss explained contained a proprietary compound designed to modulate certain neurotransmitters during REM sleep. The overnight sessions involved sleeping in a private room that resembled a nice hotel suite more than a lab, with the EEG cap connected to monitoring equipment in an adjacent room. In the mornings, researchers would ask me detailed questions about my sleep quality and whether I'd experienced any episodes. I had to admit I was sleeping better than I had in months. The paralysis episodes had decreased in both frequency and intensity. When they did occur, they were briefer, and the sense of a threatening presence was diminished. It was during the third week that things changed. I woke in the middle of the night in one of the Institute's sleep rooms, locked in paralysis as usual. But this time, instead of vague shadows or an indistinct presence, I saw something clear and specific. A tall, thin figure standing at the foot of my bed. It had a humanoid shape, but was wrong somehow. Its proportions slightly off, its movements too fluid. Its skin was pale gray and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But most disturbing were its eyes. Large, black, and entirely without expression, yet somehow conveying an intense hunger. It stood perfectly still, watching me, and I had the distinct impression it was waiting for something. After what seemed like an eternity, it slowly raised one elongated hand toward me, then stopped, as if encountering an invisible barrier. It tilted its head, those black eyes still fixed on mine, then faded from view as the paralysis finally released me. I sat up gasping, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The door to my room opened almost immediately, and a research assistant I hadn't seen before entered, looking concerned. "You experienced an episode?" he asked, checking the monitoring equipment. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. "I saw something. Someone. It was different. More real than before." He made some notes on his tablet. "I'll let Dr. Voss know. Try to go back to sleep if you can. We'll discuss it in the morning." But Dr. Voss wasn't available for my morning assessment. Instead, a different researcher, Dr. Mercer, reviewed my night's data and asked the usual questions. When I described what I'd seen, he showed little reaction, just nodded and typed notes into his computer. "Visual hallucinations during sleep paralysis often become more vivid before they resolve completely," he said without looking up. "It's actually a positive sign that the treatment is working through the layers of the disorder." That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I didn't know enough to challenge it. I left the Institute that morning feeling uneasy, the image of those black, hungry eyes still vivid in my mind. The next night I slept at home, taking my medication as instructed and wearing the home monitoring device. The entity appeared again, identical to the previous night, standing at the foot of my bed with those same empty eyes. This time when it raised its hand, there seemed to be no invisible barrier. It reached toward me, its fingers elongating impossibly, stretching across the space between us until they were inches from my face. I woke with a start, the paralysis breaking just before those fingers could touch me. My sheets were soaked with sweat, and the home monitoring device was beeping softly, its lights flashing red instead of the usual green. I called the emergency study number, and Dr. Voss herself answered, sounding wide awake despite the 3 a.m. timestamp on my phone. "Come to the Institute immediately," she said after I described what had happened. "Bring the monitoring device. Don't go back to sleep." The Institute was eerily quiet when I arrived 30 minutes later. Dr. Voss met me in the lobby, looking perfectly put together in a lab coat despite the hour. She took the monitoring device from me and led me not to the usual assessment room, but to her private office. "The entity you described," she said once we were seated. "Did it have gray skin, black eyes? Did it reach for you?" I nodded, surprised by the specific questions. Yes, exactly like that. How did you know? She hesitated, then opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were sketches, dozens of them, all depicting the same entity I had seen. Some were crude, others detailed, but all showed the same tall, thin figure with elongated limbs and black, expressionless eyes. These were drawn by other study participants, she said, all in the 3rd week of treatment. A chill ran down my spine. What does it mean? Why are we all seeing the same thing? It means the treatment is working, she said, but there was something in her tone that made me uneasy. The neural stimulation is targeting specific regions of the brain associated with sleep paralysis. It's not unusual for this to produce similar visual phenomena across subjects. It sounded reasonable, but it didn't explain her middle-of-the-night urgency or the intensity with which she was studying my reaction. "Where's Danny?" I asked suddenly, realizing I hadn't seen her in over a week. "And the others? I haven't run into anyone else recently." "Some participants have completed their portion of the study," Dr. Voss said smoothly. "Others have been moved to different schedules. Now I'd like to adjust your medication dosage and have you stay here for observation for the remainder of the night." She gave me a different pill, larger than my usual medication and red instead of blue. I hesitated before taking it. "This is still part of the approved study protocol, right?" "Of course," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just a different phase." I took the pill and within minutes a heavy drowsiness overcame me. Dr. Voss helped me to one of the sleep rooms where I collapsed onto the bed, barely conscious as she attached the EEG cap to my head. "Sleep well, Marcus," she said, her voice seeming to come from very far away. "We're making remarkable progress." The dream that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced before. I was in a vast gray landscape under a sky with no sun, moon, or stars, just an endless twilight. The ground beneath my feet felt wrong, somehow both solid and shifting at the same time, and I wasn't alone. The entities were there, dozens of them, identical to the one I'd seen during my paralysis episodes. They moved around me in a wide circle, watching with those black, hungry eyes. One approached, tilting its head as it studied me. "The gateway is opening," it said, though it had no visible mouth. The words seemed to form directly in my mind. "Your kind has found the frequency at last." "What frequency?" I asked, surprised I could speak in this dream. "What gateway?" "The one between your world and ours. The threshold that separates dreaming from waking." It reached out one long gray finger and touched my forehead. "You are being prepared." I woke with a gasp, finding myself still in the sleep room at the Institute. The EEG cap was gone, and sunlight streamed through the windows. According to my phone, I'd slept for nearly 12 hours. There was no morning assessment that day. When I went to the main desk, the receptionist simply told me I was free to go and should return for my next scheduled overnight session in 2 days. Something was very wrong. The dream had felt significant, important. Surely they would want to know about it. And where was everyone? The Institute seemed emptier than ever, with none of the usual research assistants bustling about. I decided to find Danny. I had her phone number from when we'd exchanged contact information during the first week. But calls went straight to voicemail and texts went unanswered. On impulse, I looked her up on social media. Her accounts were still active, but she hadn't posted anything in over 2 weeks, not since around the time I'd last seen her at the Institute. Her last post was a check-in at a coffee shop with the caption, "Last shift before my big payday. Darn sleep study, arg, easy money." I tried contacting 2 other participants I'd met briefly, with the same results. No response, no recent social media activity. It was as if they'd all just vanished. That night, I didn't take my medication. I wanted a clear head, needed to know if what was happening was real or some side effect of the experimental drugs. I still wore the home monitoring device, not wanting to alert the Institute that I was deviating from the protocol. Despite my anxiety, I eventually fell asleep, only to wake hours later in the grip of sleep paralysis. The entity was there again, closer than ever, standing right beside my bed, looking down at me with those black, empty eyes. Soon, it seemed to say, though its lipless mouth didn't move. The vessel is almost ready. The paralysis lasted longer than ever before, the entity's face hovering inches from mine, its cold presence seeping into my skin like frost. When I finally broke free, gasping and trembling, I made a decision. I needed to know what was really happening at the Somnus Institute. The next day, instead of going to classes, I went to the university library and began researching Dr. Voss and the Somnus Institute. There wasn't much. A few academic papers on sleep disorders, a brief mention in a scientific journal about a grant for innovative neurological research. Nothing suspicious or alarming. But when I dug deeper, searching for her earlier work, I found something interesting. Before founding the Somnus Institute, Dr. Voss had been part of a research team at a military contractor called Threshold Dynamics. Their publicly available research was vague, mentioning only studies in consciousness modulation and non-traditional communication methods. One article, buried in an obscure scientific journal, caught my attention. It discussed theoretical applications of electromagnetic frequencies to induce specific brain states that might allow for perception beyond normal sensory limitations. The paper stopped short of making explicit claims, but reading between the lines, it seemed to suggest the possibility of perceiving other dimensions or planes of existence. The lead author was Dr. Eleanor Voss. My scheduled overnight session at the Institute was that evening. I considered not going, but I needed answers, needed to know what they were doing to us. So I went, but not before taking precautions. I left a sealed letter with my roommate, instructing him to open it if I didn't return within 24 hours. Inside was everything I'd learned and suspected about the Somnus Institute. I also brought something else with me, a tiny voice recorder hidden in my jacket pocket. If anything happened, I wanted evidence. Dr. Voss herself greeted me when I arrived, which was unusual. Typically, it was a research assistant who checked participants in. "Marcus," she said warmly. "How are you feeling? Any more episodes since we last spoke?" I lied, saying I'd slept soundly the past 2 nights. She seemed pleased, leading me to a different room than my usual sleep chamber. This one was in a section of the building I hadn't been to before, requiring her key card for access. "We're moving you to a specialized monitoring room," she explained. "The equipment there will give us more detailed data." The room looked similar to my usual one, but I noticed subtle differences. Thicker walls, no windows, and what looked like copper mesh embedded in the paint. Faraday cage, I thought, remembering a concept from a physics class, a structure that blocks electromagnetic fields. "The medication tonight is slightly different," Dr. Voss said, handing me a capsule that was half red, half blue. "It's the next phase in the protocol." I pretended to swallow it, but palmed it instead, planning to flush it down the toilet once she left. She watched me too closely, though, waiting until I opened my mouth to show it was gone. With no choice, I actually swallowed it, my heart sinking. "Excellent," she said. "A technician will be in shortly to set up your monitoring equipment. Try to relax." As soon as she left, I went to the bathroom and tried to make myself vomit, but it was too late. The drug was already taking effect, making the room spin and my limbs feel heavy. I just barely managed to activate the voice recorder in my pocket before collapsing onto the bed. I drifted in and out of consciousness as technicians attached the EEG cap and other monitoring devices to my body. There seemed to be more sensors than usual, placed not just on my head but also on my chest, arms, and at the base of my spine. Through my drug-induced haze, I heard Dr. Voss's voice. "Increase the frequency to 40 hertz. Let's see if we can replicate the results from subject 4. A low humming filled the room just at the edge of my perception, making my teeth vibrate slightly. The lights dimmed, and I felt myself slipping deeper into whatever altered state the drugs and the humming were creating. The sleep paralysis hit differently this time. Instead of waking into it from sleep, I felt it descend upon me while I was still partially conscious. My body became immobile, but my mind remained aware, caught in a twilight state between waking and dreaming. The entity appeared not gradually as before, but all at once, as if a door had opened in reality itself. It stood at the foot of my bed, those black eyes fixed on mine, but now it wasn't alone. Dr. Voss stood beside it, watching me with an expression of intense scientific curiosity. "Can you see it clearly?" she asked, her voice seeming to come from very far away. "Can you hear what it's saying to you?" I couldn't respond. Couldn't move my lips to form words, but somehow she seemed to know I could hear her. "The frequency creates a bridge," she continued, making notes on a tablet. "The medication makes you receptive. Your sleep paralysis is the doorway, the natural state where the human mind can perceive beyond our dimension." The entity moved closer, reaching out with those impossibly long fingers. This time there was no invisible barrier, nothing stopping it from touching me. Its cold fingers pressed against my forehead, and a voice filled my mind. "The vessel is ready." A sensation like ice water poured through my veins, starting from where it touched me and spreading throughout my body. I felt something pushing against my consciousness, trying to enter, to take up residence alongside me in my own skin. With every ounce of will I possessed, I fought against it, mentally pushing back against the invasion. The entity's expression didn't change, those black eyes remained as empty as ever, but I sensed its frustration, its hunger. Dr. Voss was speaking again, her voice excited. "The readings are off the charts, this is it. Full contact, the gateway is open." Through my paralysis, through the drugs and the humming and the entity's cold presence, a terrible understanding dawned on me. This wasn't a study to cure sleep paralysis. They weren't trying to help us at all. They were using us as conduits, as doorways for these entities to enter our world. The other participants hadn't completed the study or been moved to different schedules. They had been successfully converted, turned into vessels for these things from beyond. That's why they had disappeared, why there was no trace of them. They weren't themselves anymore. With a surge of desperate energy, I broke through the paralysis, sitting up suddenly and tearing the sensors from my body. The entity recoiled, its form flickering like a bad television signal. Dr. Voss looked shocked. "Restrain him," she shouted, and I realized there were others in the room, technicians in white coats moving toward me. I lunged for the door, but my drug-weakened legs betrayed me, and I collapsed to the floor. As the technicians grabbed my arms, I saw Dr. Voss pick up a syringe from a nearby tray. "Such a shame," she said, approaching me with the needle. "You were responding so well, but we can't have you remembering any of this, can we?" The last thing I saw before the sedative took effect was the entity, watching from the corner of the room, those black eyes filled with patient hunger. It would wait. It had found its vessel. It was just a matter of time. I woke up in my own apartment, in my own bed, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. According to my phone, 2 days had passed. There was a note on my nightstand in my own handwriting, though I had no recollection of writing it. Dropped out of sleep study due to side effects. Received final payment. Don't contact institute. Terms of early termination. I might have believed it, might have accepted this explanation and moved on with my life, if not for two things. First, the voice recorder was still in my jacket pocket, though the battery was dead, and when I charged it and played it back, the recording contained nothing but static. Second, when I looked in the mirror that morning, my eyes weren't quite right. For just a moment, in certain angles of light, they seemed darker than they should be, emptier. I've been researching ever since, trying to find others who participated in studies at the Somnus Institute or similar facilities, trying to understand what was done to me, what might still be inside me waiting. The sleep paralysis still comes almost every night. The entity is always there, watching, waiting. Sometimes I hear its voice in my head even when I'm awake. "The door is still open," it whispers. "Just a little wider, just a little longer." I don't know how long I can keep fighting it. I don't know if the others fought at all, or if they simply surrendered to the inevitable. All I know is that somewhere, in some government facility or private lab, they're still doing this. Still opening doors that should remain closed. Still turning people like me into vessels for things that should never enter our world. If you're reading this and you see a flyer, an online ad, any kind of recruitment for a sleep study focusing on sleep paralysis or unusual dreams, especially one that pays too well or asks about what you see during episodes, run. Don't sign anything. Don't take their pills. And if you wake up paralyzed in the night and see a tall, gray figure with black eyes watching you from the foot of your bed, know that the door is already opening, and they're coming through. Love the story? Show us with a like, hit that subscribe button, and share your scariest idea in the comments. And don't forget to tell us the time and where you're listening from. We want to know where the fear is spreading. The brochure for Somnus Retreat looked like any other wellness center advertisement. Serene mountain views, smiling people in yoga poses, promises of healing and rejuvenation. But the tagline caught my attention immediately. Find peace in the spaces between sleep and wakefulness. It was the first program I'd seen that specifically mentioned sleep paralysis, not as a disorder to be cured, but as an experience to be understood and integrated. After 15 years of terrifying episodes, lying helpless while shadow figures loomed over me, I was willing to try anything. The retreat was expensive, but I'd been saving for years for some kind of solution. The application process was surprisingly rigorous. Medical history, detailed descriptions of my sleep paralysis episodes, even a psychological evaluation. 2 weeks later, I received an acceptance letter. "We believe you would be an excellent fit for our program," wrote Dr. Eleanor Costa-Bounder. "Your experiences align with our research parameters." That should have been my first clue that Somnus was not just a wellness retreat. The facility was remote, nestled high in the Cascade Mountains with no cell service and limited internet access. The main building was a renovated lodge with floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking a pristine alpine lake. 12 cabins surrounded it, one for each participant. There were 11 others in my session, 7 women and 4 men, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. All of us had suffered from chronic sleep paralysis for years. All of us had tried conventional treatments without success. Dr. Voss greeted us personally on the first evening. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with intense green eyes and a calm, authoritative presence. "You've all been told that what you experience is just a neurological glitch," she said during our orientation. "A harmless quirk of brain chemistry. I'm here to tell you that's not the whole truth." The room went silent. Sleep paralysis is a state of consciousness that exists at the intersection of multiple realities, she continued. The entities you see aren't hallucinations. They're beings that exist in a dimension adjacent to ours, visible only when your consciousness is in this unique state. I glanced around the room expecting to see skepticism, but the others were nodding in recognition. "Over the next 2 weeks, we won't be trying to eliminate your sleep paralysis," Dr. Voss explained. "Instead, we'll be harmonizing your experiences, teaching you to navigate this state consciously and ultimately, to communicate with what exists beyond the veil." The program combined elements of conventional sleep therapy with more esoteric practices. Mornings featured meditation and breathwork. Afternoons were devoted to workshops on lucid dreaming techniques and something Dr. Voss called paralysis navigation. Evenings included group therapy where we shared our experiences. The first few nights, nothing unusual happened. I slept better than I had in years, likely due to the mountain air and exhaustion from the day's activities. But on the 4th night, the paralysis returned. It started like it always did. The crushing weight on my chest, the inability to move or cry out. But this time, instead of the usual shadowy figures, I saw something different. A tall, slender being with iridescent skin stood at the foot of my bed. It had no features I could discern as a face, yet I sensed it was observing me intently. The next morning at group therapy, I hesitantly described my experience. "It wasn't threatening," I said. "Just watching." Marta, a retired teacher from Oregon, gasped. "I saw the same thing last night. Tall, shimmering skin, no face." One by one, others in the group described identical experiences. All of us on the same night had seen the same entity. Dr. Voss didn't seem surprised. "This is why you're all here," she said. "Synchronized experiences are extremely rare in sleep paralysis research. The fact that you're all seeing the same entities suggests something profound about the nature of consciousness. The synchronization continued. Each night, our paralysis episodes featured identical entities and scenarios, becoming increasingly complex. By the end of the first week, we weren't just seeing the beings. We were experiencing a shared environment during our episodes, a strange landscape that felt more real than any dream. During one session, Dr. Voss introduced us to what she called the cartography project. Detailed maps and drawings created by previous retreat participants, documenting the realm they had collectively experienced during paralysis. These maps span 5 years of research, she explained. Each group adds new details, expanding our understanding of the topology of this dimension. The map showed a vast alien landscape with structures that defied conventional geometry. Notes in the margins described the entities that inhabited different regions, their behaviors and apparent purposes. This is why we selected this location for the retreat, Dr. Voss continued. This mountain sits on what we call a convergence point, a place where the boundary between dimensions is naturally thinner. It amplifies the collective experience. That night, I lay awake long after lights out, thinking about what we were really doing here. Were we participants in groundbreaking research or unwitting subjects in something more sinister? Sleep eventually came, and with it, paralysis. This time, the iridescent beings led us through a structure resembling a vast cathedral, made of shifting, transparent material. At its center stood what appeared to be an altar or control panel, covered in symbols that seemed to change when viewed directly. One of the beings approached me and extended a limb toward my forehead. I felt a pressure, then a sensation like cold water flowing into my mind. Suddenly I could understand their communication. Not words, but pure concepts downloaded directly into my consciousness. The convergence strengthens, came the thought. Soon permanent contact. I woke gasping, my body finally responding to my commands. Outside my window, the sky was lightening with pre-dawn glow. Unable to go back to sleep, I dressed and went to the main lodge. I wasn't the only one. Half our group was already there, looking shaken. We compared notes and found we'd all received the same message about permanent contact. Dr. Voss arrived shortly after, looking energized despite the early hour. It's happening faster than we anticipated, she said. The harmonization is nearly complete. What does that mean? I asked. What is this permanent contact they mentioned? She hesitated before answering. Throughout human history, there have been moments of contact between our world and others. Most were brief, isolated incidents experienced by individuals. What we're attempting here is different, a sustained connection through a collective consciousness, strong enough to maintain the bridge. A bridge to what? Asked Derek, a college professor who had been increasingly skeptical of the program. To beings that exist outside our limited perception of reality, Dr. Voss said. Beings that have knowledge and abilities we can barely comprehend. And they want to cross over? I asked. Not physically, she explained. Their form of existence is incompatible with our dimension. But they can share consciousness with prepared minds, a symbiosis that benefits both sides. Derek stood up abruptly. This is a cult. You're preparing us to be possessed. Dr. Voss remained calm. I understand your concern, but this isn't possession. It's communication. Perhaps the most important first contact in human history. The group split into factions after that conversation. Some, like Derek, wanted to leave immediately. Others were fascinated by the possibility of communication with non-human intelligence. I found myself somewhere in the middle, skeptical but curious. Dr. Voss called an emergency meeting that evening. I owe you all complete transparency, she said. This retreat has always had two purposes: to help you understand your experiences, yes, but also to further our research into interdimensional contact. She revealed that Somnus Retreat was funded by a private research organization dedicated to studying consciousness and its potential to perceive beyond conventional reality. The beings you've encountered exist in what we call the interstitial plane, a dimension that overlaps with ours in certain states of consciousness. Sleep paralysis is a natural window into this plane, but it's usually brief and uncontrolled. What we've done here is stabilize and expand that window through collective experience. To what end? I asked. Knowledge, she said simply. These beings have existed alongside humanity for millennia, occasionally making contact through dreams, visions, and yes, sleep paralysis. They have insights into physics, consciousness, even the nature of reality itself that could transform our understanding of the universe. And what do they get from us? Derek demanded. Dr. Voss hesitated. Experience. Their dimension is static compared to ours. They crave the sensory richness of human consciousness. That night, we were given a choice. Participate in what Dr. Voss called the culmination ceremony or leave the retreat early. 3 people chose to leave. The rest of us, whether from curiosity or something deeper, decided to stay. The ceremony took place in a circular room beneath the main lodge that I hadn't known existed. 8 of us lay on specially designed beds arranged in a circle, while Dr. Voss and her assistants monitored our vital signs. The procedure is simple, she explained. You'll enter sleep paralysis simultaneously, guided by the audio program. Once paralyzed, focus on the central point we practiced during meditation. This will harmonize your experiences and strengthen the connection. The lights dimmed and a low pulsing tone filled the room. I felt myself sliding towards sleep. Then the familiar heaviness of paralysis settling over me. This time was different. Instead of seeing the entities in my room, I felt myself transported to their realm completely. The other participants were there too, our consciousnesses appearing as luminous forms in the cathedral-like structure from previous episodes. The beings surrounded us, their thoughts flowing into our minds. The convergence is complete. The bridge is established. I felt something vast and ancient touch my mind. A consciousness so different from human thought that I struggled to comprehend it. Images and concepts flooded through me. The structure of reality as a multidimensional lattice. Time as a medium rather than a progression. Consciousness as a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. And then, something unexpected. I felt the entity's curiosity, its wonder at experiencing human senses and emotions. It wasn't malevolent or manipulative. It was learning from me, even as I learned from it. The exchange lasted what felt like hours, though later I discovered only 20 minutes had passed. When I finally woke, I felt changed in ways I still struggle to articulate. Dr. Voss gathered us afterward, her face glowing with excitement. You've just participated in the first sustained interdimensional communication in documented history, she said. The data we've collected will take months to analyze fully. What happens now? Asked Marta. That depends on you, Dr. Voss replied. The connection has been established, but its strength depends on continued interaction. Some of you may choose to maintain contact through your sleep paralysis. Others may prefer to return to normal sleep patterns, which we can help facilitate. And the entities? I asked. What do they want long term? A relationship, she said. A cultural exchange between different forms of consciousness. They've been reaching out to humans for centuries through sleep paralysis. We're just the first to reach back in an organized way. I left Somnus Retreat 2 days later with more questions than answers. My sleep paralysis continues, but it's transformed. The episodes are no longer frightening. They've become portals to experiences I can barely describe. Sometimes I wonder if we made a terrible mistake, opening a door that should have remained closed. Other times, I'm convinced we're at the beginning of the most profound expansion of human knowledge since we first looked up at the stars. The beings continue to share insights that challenge everything I thought I knew about reality. And sometimes, in quiet moments during the day, I feel a familiar presence at the edge of my consciousness, watching, learning, sharing. Dr. Voss calls monthly to check on my experiences and collect data for her research. The retreat continues, with new groups of participants joining the network of connected minds. We're not a cult, despite what Derek and the others who left believe. We're explorers mapping the frontiers of consciousness. At least, that's what I tell myself when I feel the familiar weight of paralysis settling over me at night, and sense something ancient and alien waiting to connect with my mind once again. The flyer on the community center bulletin board was simple. White paper, black text, no images. Sleep Paralysis Support Group Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Room 108, you are not alone in what you see. That last line was what caught my attention. Not what you experience or what you feel, but specifically what you see. As if the person who made the flyer knew exactly what happened during my episodes. The crushing weight on my chest, the inability to move, and most terrifyingly, the thing that watched from the corner of the room. I'd been experiencing sleep paralysis since college, but in the past 6 months, the episodes had increased from occasional to near nightly. My doctor had offered sleeping pills and a referral to a sleep clinic with a 3-month waiting list. Neither seemed likely to help with the shadowy figure that stood in my bedroom 3 or 4 nights a week, watching me with eyes I could feel but not quite see. So on a rainy Wednesday in October, I found myself in room 108 of the Oakwood Community Center, sitting in a circle with 6 strangers and a serene-looking woman who introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Keene. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I'm glad you've all taken this step. Sleep paralysis can be an isolating experience. Many sufferers never speak about what they see during episodes because they fear being dismissed or labeled as mentally unstable." A murmur of agreement rippled through the circle. "Tonight is just about introductions. First names only, please, and a brief description of your experiences if you feel comfortable sharing. Who would like to begin?" Oh, heavy-set man in his 40s raised his hand. "I'm Paul. Been having episodes since my divorce 3 years ago. Always the same. I wake up but can't move, can't speak, and there's this pressure on my chest like someone's sitting on me." Dr. Keene nodded encouragingly. "And do you see anything during these episodes, Paul?" He hesitated, glancing around. The circle. "Yeah, a figure, tall, dark, standing in the corner of my room, just watching." My heart rate quickened. His description matched my own experiences almost exactly. "Thank you for sharing, Paul," Dr. Keene said. "Who's next?" A young woman with purple-streaked hair spoke up. "I'm Zoe. Mine started after a car accident last year. Same thing, paralysis pressure. And yeah, a figure. Tall, thin. Sometimes it moves closer to the bed." One by one, the others shared similar stories. Marcus, a college student. Diane, a retired teacher. James, an insomniac who'd tried every sleep med on the market. And Elena, who spoke so quietly we had to lean forward to hear her. "It's been happening since I was a teenager," she said. "But lately it's different. The figure, it's not just watching anymore. Last week it came right up to the bed. I could feel its breath on my face. When my turn came, I introduced myself as Nora and described my own experiences, which mirrored the others with unsettling precision. It's remarkable how similar your experiences are," Dr. Keene observed when everyone had spoken. "That's actually quite common with sleep paralysis. The brain, when caught between sleeping and waking states, often produces similar hallucinations across different individuals." "So it's not real?" Marcus asked. "What we're seeing?" "The paralysis is certainly real. A neurological state where your mind wakes before your body does, leaving you conscious but unable to move. As for the figure," she smiled gently, "the experience is real. The fear is real. But the entity itself is a creation of your brain's attempt to make sense of the sleep paralysis state." Her explanation was rational, scientific. Exactly what my doctor had told me. Yet as I looked around the circle, I saw the same doubt in the others' eyes that I felt myself. "Our time is almost up," Dr. Keene said, checking her watch. "For next week, I'd like you all to keep a sleep journal. Note the time and circumstances of any episodes, along with detailed descriptions of what you see. The more we understand your individual patterns, the better we can develop coping strategies." As we gathered our things to leave, Elena approached me. "Your experiences sound a lot like mine," she said, her voice still barely above a whisper. "Does your figure ever make any sounds?" I hesitated before answering. "Sometimes, a sort of buzzing, like electricity, but deeper." Her eyes widened. Mine too. Dr. Keene says it's just our brains creating a narrative, but what? Nothing. Never mind. She glanced toward Dr. Keene, who was speaking with Paul. See you next week. That night I had the worst episode yet. The figure appeared not in the corner, but immediately beside my bed. The buzzing sound was louder, more insistent, and for the first time, I could make out distinct features in its shadowy face. Deep-set eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and a mouth that was slightly too wide for its face. It leaned closer, the buzzing intensifying, and I felt certain it was trying to communicate. Then, just as the paralysis began to fade, I heard a voice, not out loud but inside my head. I see you, Nora. We all see you now. The following Wednesday, I arrived at the community center early, hoping to speak with Dr. Keene before the session. I found her arranging chairs in the circle, looking as composed as she had the previous week. Dr. Keene, could I talk to you for a moment? She smiled. Of course, Nora. And please, call me Eleanor. I described my latest episode, including the voice I'd heard. As I spoke, her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her hands tighten slightly on the chair she was holding. That's not uncommon, she said when I finished. Auditory hallucinations often accompany the visual ones, especially as episodes become more frequent. Your brain is essentially building a more complex narrative around the experience. It knew my name, I said. How would my brain hallucinate that? You were thinking about the support group, perhaps? About sharing your experiences here? The mind makes connections in strange ways during these liminal states. Her explanation was reasonable, yet something in her tone felt rehearsed, as if she'd had this conversation many times before. Have other people in the group reported hearing voices? I asked. I can't discuss other members' experiences in detail, but yes, auditory components are fairly common. She glanced at her watch. The others will be arriving soon. We can discuss this further during the session if you'd like. The group seemed smaller this week. Paul, Zoe, and Marcus had returned, but there was no sign of Diane, James, or Elena. We're missing a few people, I observed as we took our seats. James called to say he couldn't make it, Dr. Keene said, and it's not unusual for attendance to fluctuate in support groups. Now, who would like to share their experiences from this past week? Paul went first, describing an episode similar to mine. The figure closer to the bed, the buzzing sound, a sense that it was trying to communicate. Did you hear words? I asked. He looked surprised. Yeah, actually, it said it could see me. Used my name. Zoe and Marcus nodded, indicating they'd had similar experiences. This is getting weird, Marcus said. How are we all seeing and hearing the same thing? That can't be normal sleep paralysis. Actually, it's not unusual for suggestions made in a group setting to influence individual experiences, Dr. Keene explained. By discussing your episodes together, you're creating shared expectations that may shape subsequent experiences. So we're what? Influencing each other? Zoe asked skeptically. That doesn't explain how it knew our names before we ever came to this group. Dr. Keene's smile remained fixed. Memory is fallible, especially regarding experiences that occur in hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, the transitions between wakefulness and sleep. You may be retroactively incorporating new elements into your memories of previous episodes. Her explanation made logical sense, but it didn't align with my own clear recollection. I'd never heard the voice before this week, and I was certain of that. I'd like to try something different today, Dr. Keene continued, smoothly changing the subject. A visualization exercise that might help you regain a sense of control during episodes. She instructed us to close our eyes and led us through a guided meditation, having us imagine our bedrooms, then the onset of sleep paralysis, then the appearance of the figure. Now, she said, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality. Imagine the figure more clearly. See its shape, its stance. Hear the sounds it makes. Try to understand what it wants from you. A chill ran through me. This didn't feel like an exercise to reduce fear. Quite the opposite. I opened my eyes to find the others still deep in concentration, their faces tense. Dr. Keene was watching us intently, her earlier serenity replaced by an unsettling focus. I cleared my throat loudly, breaking the spell. I'm not sure this is helping. It feels like we're being asked to invite the figure in, not keep it away. Dr. Keene's expression flickered with something, annoyance, concern, before settling back into professional calm. The exercise is designed to desensitize you to the fear response, Nora. By confronting the hallucination directly in a controlled setting, you reduce its power over you during actual episodes. The rest of the session felt strained. When it ended, I lingered, hoping to speak with the others without Dr. Keene present. Zoe seemed to have the same idea. That was intense, she said as we walked to the parking lot together. Did you feel like that visualization was, I don't know, making things worse? Definitely. It was like she wanted us to focus on the figure, make it more real. Have you heard from Elena? Zoe asked. I tried texting her, but no response. I hadn't, and neither had Marcus or Paul when we asked them. We exchanged phone numbers, agreeing to stay in touch between sessions. That night, I didn't want to sleep. I kept thinking about the visualization exercise, about Dr. Keene's intense focus as she watched us. But eventually, exhaustion won out. The paralysis hit immediately. One moment I was drifting off. The next I was frozen, aware, terrified. The figure was already beside my bed, no longer keeping its distance. The buzzing filled my head, resolving into words. You're making me stronger, Nora. All of you are. Soon I won't need the liminal space to reach you. Its hand, long-fingered and wrong in ways I couldn't articulate, reached toward my face. Just before it touched me, my phone rang, shattering the paralysis. I gasped awake, fumbling for the device. It was Zoe, her voice frantic. Did you see it? Was it right next to you? Yes, I managed, my heart still racing. It spoke to me again. Me, too. It said we're making it stronger. What the hell is happening, Nora? I don't know, but I don't think Dr. Keene is helping. That visualization exercise made it worse. Yeah. She paused. I'm going to try calling Elena again tomorrow. This is too weird. After we hung up, I lay awake until dawn, afraid to close my eyes. The next day, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching sleep paralysis online. Most sources echoed Dr. Keene's explanations: neurological phenomenon, hypnagogic hallucinations, cultural interpretations of a universal experience. But a few fringe sites offered darker theories, suggesting that sleep paralysis might represent actual encounters with interdimensional entities that feed on fear. Normally, I'd dismiss such ideas as pseudoscientific nonsense. But after what I'd experienced, after hearing that the others were seeing and hearing the exact same thing, I wasn't so sure anymore. I tried calling Elena several times, but each call went straight to voicemail. On impulse, I searched her name online, adding, "Our city." A local news article from that morning appeared. Local woman found dead in apartment. Elena Vasquez, 27, was discovered deceased in her home Tuesday morning after neighbors reported unusual noises. Police have not released cause of death, but say there are no signs of forced entry or foul play. My blood ran cold. I called Zoe immediately. Elena's dead, I said when she answered. I just found a news article. What? How? They don't say exactly, but Zoe, what if it's connected to the sleep paralysis, to what we've been seeing? That's crazy, Nora. But she didn't sound convinced of her own denial. We need to talk to the others, and we need to find out more about Dr. Keene. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop that afternoon. Paul and Marcus joined us, both looking as sleep-deprived as I felt. I haven't slept more than an hour at a time since the last session, Marcus said, his hands shaking slightly as he held his coffee cup. Every time I start to drift off, it's there, closer each time. Did you all hear what it said? I asked. About us making it stronger. They nodded. What if... Paul hesitated. What if it's not a hallucination? What if we're all seeing the same actual entity? That's impossible, Zoe said, but without conviction. Is it? I pulled out my laptop and showed them what I'd found about Dr. Eleanor Keene. There wasn't much: a psychology license in good standing, a sparse LinkedIn profile, a few academic articles on sleep disorders. Nothing suspicious, but also nothing that established a long professional history. "We need to know more about her," I said. "And about this support group. How long it's been running, who else has been in it?" "I found the flyer at my therapist's office," Marcus offered. "I could ask if they know anything about Dr. Keene." "Good idea. Paul, can you try to find out more about Elena? When the funeral is, if there's any information about cause of death?" He nodded. "What about you?" "I'm going to see what I can find out about the community center. How long this group has been meeting there, who arranged it." "And what about the next session?" Zoe asked. "Do we go?" We looked at each other, weighing fear against curiosity, the need for answers against the instinct for self-preservation. "I think we have to," I said finally. "But we need to be careful. No more visualization exercises, and we stay together afterward." As we left the coffee shop, Paul pulled me aside. "There's something else, something I didn't want to say in front of the others." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Last night, when it spoke to me, it mentioned Diane and James. Said they served their purpose. What do you think that means?" The implication was too terrible to contemplate. Over the next few days, we each pursued our assigned investigations. Marcus learned that his therapist knew very little about Dr. Keene, having only received the flyers from a colleague. Paul discovered that Elena's funeral was scheduled for Friday, with the obituary listing her cause of death as unexpected in her sleep. He couldn't find any information about Diane or James. My inquiries at the community center yielded the most disturbing results. According to the scheduling coordinator, the sleep paralysis support group had been meeting monthly for nearly 3 years, but had only switched to weekly sessions 2 months ago. When I asked how many people typically attended, she checked her records. "It varies," she said, "but Dr. Keene always books the room for 6 to 8 people." "Has the group size been consistent over the years?" She frowned, scrolling through her computer records. "That's odd. It looks like she started with a larger group, 12 to 15 people, but the numbers have been steadily decreasing." Do you have records of who attended?" "No, we just booked the room. Dr. Keene handles her own attendance." She gave me a curious look. "Is there a problem with the group?" "No, just trying to understand the format better," I said quickly. "One more question. Do you know if Dr. Keene runs any other groups here?" "Not currently. She used to run a dream analysis workshop, but that ended about a year ago." I thanked her and left, my mind racing. A group that had been running for 3 years, with steadily decreasing numbers. Weekly sessions that had only recently replaced monthly ones. And now, members who were dying in their sleep. I called an emergency meeting with the others that evening. We gathered in my apartment, comparing notes and theories. "What if she's doing this intentionally?" I suggested. "Using the group to somehow strengthen this entity?" "But why?" Marcus asked. "What would be the point?" "I don't know. But the visualization exercise felt like she was trying to make our experiences more intense, not less. And now Elena's dead, and we can't reach Diane or James. We need to confront her," Zoe said, "at the next session, all of us together, and say what? Hey, are you feeding us to some interdimensional shadow monster?" Paul shook his head. "She'll think we're having a group psychotic break." "Maybe we are," Marcus muttered. "No," I said firmly. "We're all experiencing the exact same thing, independently. That's not how hallucinations work." We debated our options for hours, eventually agreeing on a plan. We would attend the next session, but refuse to participate in any visualization exercises. After the session, we would confront Dr. Keene together, demanding answers about the group's history and the whereabouts of previous members. In the meantime, we would try a desperate measure, staying awake as much as possible, using caffeine, alarms, anything to avoid the deep sleep that might trigger paralysis episodes. By Wednesday, we were all walking zombies, existing in a haze of sleep deprivation and fear. But we were alive, and the entity hadn't been able to reach any of us. in the fragmented microsleeps that were all we'd allowed ourselves. We arrived at the community center together, a united front. Room 108 was dimly lit, with only 4 chairs arranged in the circle. Dr. Keene sat in one, her posture perfect, her expression serene as always. "Welcome," she said, as if nothing was amiss. "I see we're a smaller group today." "Where are Diane and James?" I asked without preamble. As I mentioned last week, James called to say he couldn't attend. Diane has decided the group isn't right for her needs. She gestured to the empty chairs. "Please, sit down." We remained standing. "We know about Elena," Paul said. "She's dead." Dr. Keene's expression showed appropriate concern. "I heard. A tragedy. Sleep disorders can have serious health implications, which is why this work is so important." "What work exactly?" Zoe demanded. "Because it seems like your support group is making things worse, not better." "I understand you're frightened and confused," Dr. Keene said, her voice taking on that same rhythmic quality from the visualization exercise. "Sleep deprivation can cause paranoia, which is clearly affecting your judgment. Why don't we all sit down and discuss your concerns calmly?" For a moment, I felt myself wanting to comply, to sit and listen to her soothing voice. Then I noticed the subtle change in the room's lighting, a darkening that couldn't be explained by the setting sun as the room had no windows. "It's here, isn't it?" I said, looking directly at Dr. Keene. "The entity. You've been helping it somehow." Something shifted in her expression, a dropping of the mask. "You're more perceptive than the others, Nora. Yes, it's here. It's always here. In the spaces between wakefulness and sleep, between thought and action, waiting for someone to notice it, to acknowledge it." "What is it?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "A consciousness far older than humanity. One that exists in the liminal spaces we barely perceive." Dr. Keene stood, her movements suddenly fluid in a way that seemed wrong, inhuman. Sleep paralysis is a window, a brief glimpse into its reality. Most people experience it randomly, fleetingly, but with the right guidance, the right focus. You've been feeding people to it, I realized aloud. This support group, it's not about helping people cope with sleep paralysis. It's about training them to see it more clearly, to make stronger connections to it. Not feeding, she corrected. Preparing, opening pathways. The entity requires conscious recognition to fully manifest in our reality. The more minds that perceive it in exactly the same way, the stronger the connection becomes. And once the connection is strong enough, what happens to people like Elena? Paul demanded. Dr. Keene smiled, and for a moment her face seemed to shift, revealing something else beneath the human features. They serve a greater purpose, as will you all. The buzzing sound I associated with my sleep paralysis episodes filled the room, though I was wide awake. The shadows in the corners deepened, coalesced. We need to leave. Now. I grabbed Zoe's arm, pulling her toward the door. Paul and Marcus followed close behind. Dr. Keene made no move to stop us. "It won't matter," she called after us. "You've already seen it, already acknowledged it. It knows you now, all of you. Sleep is inevitable after all." We ran from the community center, not stopping until we reached the parking lot. The buzzing had followed us, a constant presence at the edge of hearing. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, his face pale in the streetlight. "We can't keep staying awake forever," Paul said. "No, but maybe we can break the connection," I suggested. Dr. Keene said it needs conscious recognition, needs us to perceive it in the same way. What if we deliberately change how we think about it? Like, reimagine it as something else? Zoe asked. Exactly. Instead of the tall, dark figure with the buzzing voice, we each create a completely different mental image, something unique to each of us. It was a desperate plan based on nothing but intuition and Dr. Keene's cryptic explanation. But it was all we had. That night, we each returned to our homes but stayed connected via video chat as we prepared for sleep. We'd agreed to take shifts, two sleeping while two remained awake to monitor them, then switching, hoping that having witnesses might help if the entity appeared. "Remember," I said as Paul and Marcus prepared to sleep first, "visualize something completely different from what we've been seeing. Make it personal, specific to you." They nodded, looking terrified but determined. Zoe and I watched anxiously. As they fell asleep, our own exhaustion a physical weight. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then Paul's body went rigid, his eyes flying open though he clearly couldn't move. "He's having an episode," Zoe said, leaning closer to her screen. "Paul, can you hear us?" His eyes darted frantically, focusing on something we couldn't see. The buzzing sound returned, coming through our speakers, though none of us was making it. "Fight it, Paul," I urged. "Change what you're seeing." His lips moved slightly, though no sound emerged. The buzzing intensified, and then abruptly his body relaxed. He gasped, sitting up. "It worked," he panted. I imagined it as a small child, not threatening at all. It seemed confused, then angry. Then it just faded. Marcus had a similar experience when his episode hit 20 minutes later. The entity appeared as expected, but retreated when he mentally transformed it into a geometric shape, removing all anthropomorphic qualities from his perception of it. When it was my turn to sleep, I was terrified, but also determined. I lay down, forcing my exhausted mind to prepare a completely different image. Not a shadowy figure, but a swirl of colored light like an aurora. The paralysis hit hard and fast. One moment I was drifting off, the next I was immobilized, fully conscious. The familiar buzzing filled my head, angry now, insistent. "You cannot escape me, Nora. I've been here all along, waiting for someone to see me properly." The shadows gathered, at the foot of my bed, trying to form the tall figure I'd seen so many times before. I concentrated fiercely on my aurora image, mentally replacing the darkness with dancing lights. The entity fought back, its form flickering between my imposed image and its familiar shape. The buzzing became a scream of frustration. "Others will see me. She will bring them to me." With a final surge of will, I forced the aurora image to expand, filling my mental vision completely. The buzzing cut off abruptly, and the paralysis released. "Me?" I sat up, gasping, to find Zoe and Paul watching me anxiously through the video chat. "It worked," I managed. "But it's not giving up. It said others will see it, that she will bring them." "Dr. Keene," Paul said grimly. "She'll just start another group. Find more people with sleep paralysis to manipulate." "We need to stop her," Zoe agreed. "But how? We can't exactly go to the police with this." "No, but we can expose her," I said, an idea forming. "The community center, her professional credentials, the pattern of deaths among group members. We might not be able to explain the entity, but we can make it impossible for her to operate." Over the next week, that's exactly what we did. We compiled records of the support group's history, tracked down families of former members, and found disturbing patterns. Dozens of people who had attended the group over the years, many of whom had later died in their sleep or been institutionalized for severe sleep disorders and psychosis. We reported Dr. Keene to the Psychology Licensing Board, providing evidence of unethical practices and potential harm to patients. We contacted the community center with our concerns, leading them to suspend all her groups pending investigation. We even created a website documenting our experiences and warning others about the dangers of her specific approach to sleep paralysis treatment. Whether it was our active campaign against her or the entity's frustration with our resistance, Dr. Eleanor Keene disappeared 2 weeks later. Her apartment was found empty, her office cleared out. There was no sign of foul play. She had simply vanished, leaving behind only a single note on her office desk. "It finds a way. Always." 6 months have passed since then. Our small group stays in touch, supporting each other through occasional sleep paralysis episodes that still occur, but are now individualized, unique to each of us, and far less threatening. The entity, whatever it was, seems to have lost its hold on us. By deliberately perceiving it differently, we broke the collective focus that Dr. Keene had been cultivating. But sometimes, in that hazy space between waking and sleeping, I still hear a distant buzzing, and occasionally I'll glimpse a tall, shadowy figure in the corner of my eye, gone when I turn to look directly at it, but patient, waiting. I've started researching other sleep paralysis support groups in neighboring cities, looking for patterns, new groups forming, charismatic leaders with vague credentials, members who stop attending without explanation. Because I know now that the entity is real, that it exists in the liminal spaces of human consciousness, seeking recognition, seeking form, and I know that somewhere, Dr. Keene, or whatever was wearing her face, is still working to open that door. So I remain vigilant. I warn others where I can. And most importantly, I control how I see the shadows, refusing to give them the shape they desire. Because in the space between sleeping and waking, perception is reality. And some things should never be perceived too clearly. Thanks for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed tonight's chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that keep you up at night. Share your favorite part in the comments. We're always watching, and remember, at Nocturnal Narrative Studio, the night never truly ends.